I think we've got a bit of a tank problem, guys, but also probably a DPS Moira problem. Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the channel. I am Stylosa. All right then, so what is this all about? What is this video? Well, there's a bit of an issue with Overwatch, and this is a side effect of the role queue. And what's happening is we've got a massive pool of DPS players, which, by the way, guys, is the most popular role in Overwatch by far. This is an FPS game. Well, it was an FPS game, but people want to play DPS, right? So back in the good old days, you could just go into competitive and play whatever role you wanted. Same for quick play as well, and play whatever role you wanted, and it would be absolutely fine in a way, although it wouldn't, because the game could be terrible, because if you end up with 5 DPS, then that's not a game of Overwatch. Instead, we fast forward to now, where we've got 222 and role queue. Now, 222 and role queue have one brilliant effect on the game, which makes every single game of Overwatch a game of Overwatch. So you know it's going to be fairly fun, it's going to be a fairly competitive game, or at least on paper it should be. However, there is one big side effect here, and it's the time of DPS queues, which we knew would happen because that is the most popular role in the game across all the levels of play. But then what we've got is DPS players DPSing as a tank, or DPS players apparently DPSing as Moira, and I have seen some people do this as Anna, although not as often as Anna, and the same goes for Batiste, but generally they will pick a Moira and just go around doing DPS. Sometimes with Zen they kind of do it as well, but Zen kind of just does DPS anyway. So yeah, what is going on? What is this problem? Well, in this video I'm going to go over it because I think this is something we probably need to talk about. Now, there are some ways this might go away in the future, but it all depends on time, and that's the problem here. It's all about time. It comes down to time of queues. It comes down to how long it's going to take for SR to finally sort of balance out for whatever role you're playing. So the facts are, most of the player base want to play DPS. That's fine, but we also know this has a huge impact on the other roles. So what happens is people want to have a lower queue time, so they pick a different role. Now, if you are the standard generic DPS player who doesn't play tank and who doesn't play support, and I want to throw this out there as well, I honestly believe that as you start going up the ladder and you get to the higher ends of the ladder, so this would be from diamond and above, because remember guys, only 10% of the player base is actually in diamond and above, but when you get to that level, players become more specialized. You become a really good DPS player, but you don't play tank and you don't play support. Well, that's why you're a really good DPS player, because you play DPS. And it's the same for every role. It's the same for tank. It's the same for support, right? You know, if you play loads of tank, then you can't be expected to just go and play some DPS and it'll all be totally fine. No, that's just not going to work. So what happens is these players want a shorter queue time. So the fastest queue you can get right now in Overwatch is tank. It is uncategorically tank, right? Well, categorically tank, not uncategorically. Categorically tank, ladies and gentlemen. So if you want to get a game right now in an under 1 minute queue at whatever level you're playing the game at, click that tank button. You'll get in. You'll absolutely get in, right? No questions asked. But then what do you do? Because you're not a tank player. So you're like, well, actually, what I'm going to do is play Zarya because she's DPS kind of as a tank. Or I might play Hog. Maybe I play Orisa, but I'm not really going to do too much damage as Orisa. So then you've got a problem, right? Because if the other tank player is actually a tank player and they play tank and then you're kind of not playing tank, you can't swap around in the team because you two guys are the tank players. Now, it could be even worse, and I've seen this a lot, especially when I'm playing support. You will get 2 tanks that are clearly not tank players. And you can tell, right? Because tank players play a little bit different to DPS. DPS generally out there trying to get frags, trying to get kills. Tank players are a little bit more reserved. They're more aware of what's going on with their team, but they'll just go in. They'll just start. If they're playing Reinhardt, they're charging in. They go way too deep. They don't really sort of appreciate the way a tank should be played. Now, all of this is kind of redundant, and you guys are probably thinking this, well, Sty, why are you even talking about this? Because if you've got different SRs for each individual role, why does this matter? Because if I am a tank player and I'm playing, let's say I'm a 3k tank player, but I want to play DPS, and I've completed my DPS placement, and it's put me, let's just say for argument's sake, around 3k. So let's just say you're 3k again. Now, the matchmaker, or well, rather the ranked MMR system and the SR system, after placement games, is kind of putting people sort of close to where they are on their other roles for the most part. Now, generally, if you're like way overplaced, so if you're this 3k player in our example, but it places you into master for DPS, and then you play a game and you lose, play another game and you lose, you're going to start losing your rank, and you'll eventually get to the rank you belong at. But that's the whole point of this part of the video. It takes time. Okay, now in the past, you just had one rank. You just had your SR. So you would play through games, whatever, that's fine. Eventually, you'd get to the rank you belong at. Now, you guys remember, I always say rank doesn't matter, and it doesn't. It's about having a good quality of game, and that's what this video is all about. It isn't so much about focusing on the rank, but we have to look at that because it's a visual representation of the quality of your games in kind of a way, right? So let's look at these 3 roles. So if I place as tank at 3k, I place at DPS as 3k, and I place at support at 3k. So there's 3 roles there at 3k. Now, what I'm going to do is play tank, because I'm a tank player, so I keep playing tank. Maybe I'll start getting up to sort of 3.3k, 3.4k. Maybe I'll make it to Masters as tank. That's cool. Then I go and play DPS. Now, my DPS is still at 3k. I'm not a 3k DPS player in this example. Let's say I'm like a 2.5k, so I lose that game. And then maybe I'll go for another queue, and then maybe I'll win that game, luckily, and then maybe I'll go for another queue and we win the next game, and then maybe I'll lose the next game. But you can see where I'm going with this, right? It takes a long time for that player to get placed in the correct DPS slot because they've got long queue times, and this is the same at any rank as well. I know it's not as bad when you start getting to the more common ranks, so kind of like around high silver, gold, platinum. In those regions, it's not as bad. It's not like you're going to be facing like a 20-minute plus DPS queue. It might only be 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes. But even then, people will probably just take the 1 minute queue because it's like, well, I want the game quick, right? And that's a legitimate sort of problem that the Blizzard devs and even Jeff highlighted back way when we spoke about role queue for the first time on the interviews that I did with him on the channel. So there's all these issues, right? But the fact is, the moral of this story, it will take longer for you to get to your correct rank because you've got 3 different ranks. And that's a problem. So what is happening is, even though we're getting games which are more favorable on paper, we have a more structured team, there is a set meta, sort of, that is 2 tanks, 2 DPS, 2 support. The problem we're facing, and I'm seeing this a lot, is often the tank is not a tank player. One of the supports might not be a support player. Now, this isn't a problem as such because, yes, these players, they need to play the game in those roles to get better at the game. And this is where sort of, like, there's a little caveat here, a little sort of get out clause that over time, the players will get better. The DPS players that are selecting tank because they just want to do damage as fast as possible and get that Q down, eventually might start playing tanks. So we've got this positive outcome potentially where you have these one-trick players that maybe just play, well, let's not say one-trick, but main players. So you're just a DPS main. But because you're getting exposed to more tank play, you're playing more tank play. Because tanks are in more demand, well, then it's kind of like makes sense that you play more tank because you get less Q. So then you get better as a tank, you become a better tank. Then you can still go back to playing your DPS because you're still good at DPS. And the same goes for the supports. What I'm worried about, though, is the time investment this takes to actually work. So I've noticed people talking about off-roll. Now, this is the other section of the video I want to talk about. And this is, I've seen a lot of stuff going on about this. And it's like, oh, I've got this guy, he's on his off-roll, he's going to throw the game. The game's going to be terrible. And they're kind of right, but they're also kind of wrong because these players still need to play that off-roll to get the experience to be effective in that role. But on the other hand, they are kind of right because if you get somebody in your team, you know, you imagine you're in some match and let's say, you know, you're doing really well. You're like 3.8, 3.9k. Let's say you're 4k, so you're doing really, really well. You go into the game as support, but your 2 tanks are clearly just 2 DPS guys who just don't care. And they're just sort of like, well, I just wanted to play tank. It doesn't matter. It's not my main role, so I don't care what I do in this game, so I'm just going to troll. And then maybe you lose your 4k rating, and then you get really frustrated. And that's kind of Overwatch in a nutshell, right? People put too much emphasis on their rank and not on the quality of game. So speaking of the quality of game, another thing which is happening is the range of SR people are getting matched with is a bit wide. Now, it has to be just because of the number of people playing the game. But here's the thing, right? There are enough people playing this game. There's just too many DPS playing the game, and there isn't enough DPS slots. This is an interesting thing to throw out there. What do you think would have happened if they, instead of forcing 2-2-2, forced 1 tank, 1 support, and the rest were DPS? Maybe queue times would be faster. Well, they would be faster for DPS because you've got 2 extra slots for DPS, but is that the Overwatch we would want to play? Overwatch is probably better as 2-2-2, but there just isn't as enough sort of incentive for DPS players to go and pick up the other roles and put time into them. So like I said, you come back to this age-old issue of like, well, this isn't my main role, so I don't care. I'm just going to play on this role because I don't care, and it's like, whatever, I literally don't care. I just want a fast game. And that's not good because it lowers the quality of the game. So the SR issue is I've been playing a lot of games, and I've mainly been playing tank, and well, mainly been playing support and tank. I've almost got to 4K actually on support. I'm doing quite well on support. Tank, I'm playing it every now and again. DPS, I haven't finished my placement, so that kind of tells you the story there, doesn't it? But yeah, so when I'm playing tank, I might, or support, I go into a game and there'll be like really wild sort of ranges of SR. So I think off the top of my head, I think I was just under 3.9k on the support, and I had a diamond tank. Now, a diamond tank and a diamond DPS, which is kind of weird. Now, okay, rank doesn't matter, but the problem is when you've got such a wide SR range like that, the games can get really funky. So if you've got 3.9k players and then one of your tanks is like diamond, which is below 3.5, that's really low. Like that is a really like not low's not right to say. It's a gap. And the games play differently at different levels. So that diamond player in a crucial role, being the tank, might not understand certain positioning, might not do certain things that you'd expect a player at that level to do. And this works the other way. So I've been playing on my tank account, which is lower than my support. My tank account's like 3.6, I think it was, or 3.7. I think it's 3.6 actually. I can't actually remember. I'm like, this is the thing. I don't look at my rank. I literally don't care about my rank. But it's around about that level. But there will be sometimes GM players in those games, and I'm like, okay, this is like a low master account. Suddenly I've got like GM DPS and GM. It's like, wow, this is crazy. And the game can be a complete steamroll because the enemy team doesn't have that. Now, this is going to be different at everybody's level, and it's all kind of anecdotal evidence where, we're all just talking from our own experience. We don't have access to the stats. We can't physically work this out. Blizzard can, and Blizzard will know. But there is a problem with role queue, and it's a weird problem. But the only sort of good news which can come out of this is the problem might get better over time because players will just get better at their roles, and eventually they'll get to their correct rank, and then they'll start working their way up from that rank as they get better in the role. So that's just it. I mean, there's no easy answer here. Like, on the one hand, we want fast queues for every single role. On the other hand, we want a balanced game, and you can't have both, because if you want a faster queue, then you have to increase the SR range, which means you've got players of different skill levels, wider skill levels in the same game, which can be really weird and actually can translate into games which are really, really weird. Guys, let me know what you think about this in the comments below. I'm very interested in your experience. I want you to tell me how you've been experiencing 222 so far and role queue. Are you a DPS main? Are you frustrated? Are you a tank main that's frustrated when you don't get a tank player with you or a proper tank partner? Or are you a DPS player that just a support player that just DPSs Moira? I don't know. Guys, let me know in the comments below. It's a massively complex issue. This is, I don't think there's an easy answer. All right, guys, I've been Stylosa. This is Unit Loss. It's been quite a detailed, in-depth video on this. It's something I've wanted to talk about for a while, as you guys can probably guess. But yeah, go crazy in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Toodaloo.